Good morning and welcome to this Red Zone and Financial Mail online event titled Radio Reshaped and Redefined in association with the NAB. I'm Arya Kelman, Chief Creative Officer at Tilt. So the nature of radio presenting as we know it is evolving at a rapid rate, with advances in technology resulting in additional engagement mechanisms paired with changes in skill sets needed these days. And so really it's necessary for the industry to rethink their talent management approach and how best to utilize on-air personalities to engage audiences and provide value to marketers. No longer can a broadcaster just be a presenter with a good voice. Now they need to be as engaging, if not more engaging, and multi-skilled as a social media influencer, a content provider, a storyteller, a brand ambassador, and they have to have an impact on their community. So how compelling is talent nowadays? Actually, and how can marketers leverage and utilize radio stations and their presenters efficiently? That's what we're discussing this morning. We're discussing the evolution of talent within radio as a critical success factor, looking at the impact of advances in technology and social media and how to utilize marketing and radio optimally, and where there is a need for creativity to drive change, innovation, and transformation, because that's what we need now more than ever before. To unpack the conversation this morning, and because good radio depends on good content and talent is key, we're joined by two rock stars of radio, Utilise Ravele, radio presenter at the 947 Weekend Breakfast Show, and Martin Bester, breakfast show presenter at Jacaranda FM. Weighing in on the business back end of things, Tony Soglo, SABC Radio Business Manager for the Fortune Combo, which is Radio 2000, SAFM, and Lotus FM, and John Walls, co-owner at Ultimate Media. Tony, let me come to you first. I need to ask you what good broadcasting looks like, but I need you to unpack it for me in a 2021 context.
Morning, Aaron. Morning to the rest of the team. I'm glad to be on the panel and looking forward to a great discussion. I think for me, the first thing that I would say about good broadcasting and broadcasting in general is that, first of all, broadcasting to me ultimately is a connection that the station or the presenter makes with, one, the listener, and two, your commercial client. There's so many things that one can say about broadcasting, but the human nature of the presenter behind the microphone is what tops every other medium that we have. To have the Martins of this world, the Holy Simons of this world, making that connection with a listener on the other side and evoking an emotion. We take for granted the ability for us to listen. The reason why we're so glued to radio is mainly because of the emotion that it evokes, whether it's a happy one, whether it's a sad one, whether you're communicating information, but something that makes the person listening behind on the other side of the microphone evoking emotion from them, for me, is one of the top things that makes good broadcasting amongst the many.
Utilise, let's pick up on this idea of connection in a 2021 context. And every morning, and I see it on social, you connect with your followers on social media in a very authentic and meaningful way. It's a one-to-one conversation almost on digital. Talk to me about the difference in the sort of genre of connection where it is you and the radio station and the listener versus that direct one-to-one that one gets on social.
Yeah. I don't think it's actually that different. I think it just takes on different forms. It's like stepping into a shop and saying you like to wear pants, but there's different kind of pants that you can wear, but everything is still under the same thing. It's all about that connection. And I think when it comes to radio, it's almost that one-on-one connection, but it's also happening within a sense of community. And that's what everybody signs up for. They sign up for we're going to cry together. We're going to laugh together. We're going to experience this together at the same time, perhaps in different ways sometimes, but we are all in this together. But we're also able to do it whilst we're on the move, where, sometimes I find that when it comes to social media, it's unless you've got your phone in your hand, unless you are online, you kind of like miss the moment. And what people do in a radio perspective is that you almost create that appointment tune in, that appointment listening to say, you know what? I know that Martin is on every single morning at 6:00. I know that Ulisani is on air every single Saturday at 7. And I know that the experience that I'm going to get of hearing her voice, hearing her joy, hearing whatever features, whatever stories, whatever insights she is bringing to me that morning is what I am signing up for. It's a different kind of connection, but it is connection nonetheless.
Martin, building on this idea of kind of connection and the evolution of radio, I mean, what do you think are the differences between how you would run a show and engage on a show 10 years ago versus, say, now? Or do those fundamentals of broadcasting remain true, but the platforms and opportunities with which to engage audiences shift as technology kind of evolves?
Look, I think the one principle that has stayed the same and consistent all throughout is, I mean, you still hear the line today, content is king. I mean, that's a line that I can remember going way back when I started radio, and you hear people that are social media influencers and, you know, people who are in a digital space still say the same thing. Content is king. You know, Tony was queen. Tony was talking about the connection and Lisani as well about the immediacy of radio. And let's be honest, that is still also there with digital, with social media today. It is immediate, which brings the pressure that we've known and that we're used to in radio, because radio was your immediate platform. You know, you get the live read out now, et cetera, et cetera. But I mean, it's mirrored by social media. So there are a lot of similarities. There are a lot of principles that are exactly the same back then as it is today. I mean, if you look exactly at what people do on social media and on digital platforms, although the technology has changed and advanced, the principle, I mean, dare I say, sometimes it's even more simple. It's just a picture, or it's a dance, or it's a joke. How is that so different to what we've been doing, you know, in the radio space for all those years? So yeah, there are definitely lots of similarities and definitely key factors that have stayed the same. Obviously, the way we package it, I think Ulisani also said it, the way that it's presented, that has all changed.
John, as co-owner of Ultimate Media, let's put the business lens onto this conversation. You know, everyone is fighting for their platform. The out-of-home people are fighting for theirs. The TV people are fighting for theirs. The digital people are fighting for theirs. The radio people are fighting for theirs. So talk to me about the specific value and ROI that radio gives versus the other platforms available to brands in the 2021 context.
Sure, Ari. I mean, I think the obvious thing with radio is its reach. It reaches nearly 90% of South Africa's population, and only TV comes close to that. Digital doesn't come anywhere close to that. Social doesn't come anywhere close to that, valuable as they are when integrating with radio. But I think the biggest thing, the biggest reason, and we saw this so strongly in lockdown, is, and some of the other panelists have touched on it already, it's the credibility of radio. It's the fact that, I mean, last year there was so much disinformation going around that during lockdown, you could go onto Facebook, Instagram, you had no idea. There was a 50% chance what you read was it true, was it not true? Whereas with radio, and there were countless surveys around the world that bore this out, people trust radio, they trust what they hear on radio. And the other great thing which radio brought to the party, it always has, but again, it was highlighted during lockdown, was that sense of connection that Hulisani mentioned. The fact that people in time of trauma were able to turn to a presenter that they trusted, but also to connect with other listeners as well. And that was really, really powerful. So unfortunately, advertisers didn't rush to radio during lockdown in the way they did to digital. But I think it just proved once again these sort of enduring qualities that radio always brings to the party.
Billy, let's talk reach for a second. And obviously in the digital context, perhaps there isn't the reach of traditional radio in a South African kind of socioeconomic landscape. But talk to me for a second about an influencer who has 4 million followers and a radio station that has 4 million followers, and a brand deciding, well, which direction do I go? And I think part of the answer really speaks a little bit to engagement as well, right?
Look, I think it's what John was touching on right now about numbers don't lie. But now you've thrown a span at me because you're like 4 million listeners, 4 million followers. So you are essentially kind of saying that the reach is the same, but the how and the complexity of the reach is different. And I don't think that when we go back to reporting, it gets to that granular level where we're able to say, you know, how you experience something in a sense of community is very different to how you experience something on digital when it's just a one-on-one conversation. You know, I think the value in radio is how it is able to create that two-way conversation. Of course, unless you're doing like an Insta Live where you are having kind of like that two-way space and room. But commenting via text as opposed to being able to listen to people's voices, being able to listen to other people's insights and inputs. You don't get that on social media. Social media is me telling you. It's a very one-directional conversation. Yes, I can comment back to you. Yes, I can say this back to you, but it's not the same as us being able to discuss something as a community, as for us at 947, as a community of Joburg, saying, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about that? You know, and being able to check in on each other in that sense. So I do think that there is room for the two to be married and for one to amplify the other, because what we're now starting to see is how a campaign can start on radio, but it has to live digitally some way, somehow, you know, and we have to play together. And that's the space that we're in. And you're able to see a presenter starting a campaign on their show, but then you see it coming to live on their digital platform as well. It kind of like creates this, it closes this loop of, okay, this journey continues off air. And that's the opportunity that we have. I don't think it has to be an us and them. It's not a influencer versus radio presenter, but there's a space to really marry the two and create really powerful and impactful campaigns.
Tony, talking about marrying the two, I mean, there was a time when radio stations were unsure how to charge for their own social media, figuring out what their own tweet as the station was worth on a rate card. Was it added value? Was it something that they would bill for separately? So talk to me about the demand on kind of the sales force in a radio station to now think outside of that traditional radio box in terms of how the campaign can live on its own owned digital channels and then perhaps on the presenter's owned channels as well.
Thanks, Ari. You know, I think for me, it's important to know that as a whole, and I think John touched on that, the reach of radio almost catapults what happens onto social media. I always say that radio for me is the ultimate and the first social media platform that anyone knew about. If you think about it, because as Martin mentioned earlier on, if you think about it now, it's still just a picture, but it's connecting people. And that's what happened way back in the day where radio connected people, still doing it now. And that's what's happening on social media. So for me, the social media aspect of it is the amplification of the original social media platform, which for me has been and will always be radio. And what has happened now is that advertisers are able to see that, hey, if I'm able to take what I have and put on radio and marry that with a personality, with a radio station presenter, mainly one, because of their following, but also because of that trustworthiness that they can have within within a talent. Talent now understand not only the power that they have, but the amount of people that they're able to attract merely because of what it is that they're able to offer. And brands are able to see that now and are being able to go, okay, fine, how can I marry my product with X talent, whether it's Martin, whether it's Utilise, whether it's more flavor, whoever it is, how do I marry my brand with a specific talent to amplify my brand and for it to be able to be seen by many more people? Because what you need to understand is that radio is just a platform. The platform that we give to the presenters who then use that platform, dare I say, to or also, if you want to put enrich themselves, but hey, it's their job. It's what what they do. In my experience now in the past couple of years, John will tell you that as well. Lots of brands now literally want to spend money because of the person behind the microphone, because of, again, that connection. If I'm a listener and I'm connected to a Utilise or to a Martin, and I know that I'm selling popcorn, for example, and a specific type of popcorn is something that we always see Utilise at home, whether she's at home with her friends, she's having popcorn, whether she's out shopping, she's having popcorn, which is in the car having popcorn. They go, hey, how can I marry that with my brand, but then also bring in the radio station? Because that is where it starts from and then sort of expands. And like Utilise is saying, for me, the question becomes, how does radio coexist with social media? We're fast seeing that nowadays, radio might not be the first place you get information from. But the thing is, it might be the first place you get the correct information from. And that is, for me, the difference with the two.
So Martin, take you inside the corridors that's Jacaranda FM here. Hypothetical example, a brand comes to Jacaranda, they love the breakfast show, they want to kind of execute something, they want to speak about their washing powder in a cool and exciting way. Typically the station would come up with the idea, they would bring that idea to you through the producer, and you would kind of execute that moment. Now they're saying, cool, we want you to execute the idea the station's come up with, but we also want this to live on your social platforms. And speaking about the demand that puts on you as sort of the talent, because now you kind of have to execute what's been created for you, but you also have to recreate it in your own personal, authentic kind of context.
It's just an extension, and just linking back to what Tony said so well, it's exactly the same thing. I think for a moment there, we captured ourselves with the phrases that we have come up with. If you look at the definition of a social media influencer and you describe it, it's exactly what we do on radio. You connect with an audience. On social media, you call it a paid partnership. On radio, we call it advertising. It comes back, to exactly the same thing. So I think the moment that you realize that and you get rid of all the titles and the phrases, it becomes easy to see. It becomes more clear to you. If they want you to put it onto your social media, it's not a big deal. It's just an extension. It's another dimension to what you don't have on the FM, and that's nothing new in radio. I mean, when radio went commercial in South Africa, was it about 96? We had to change our mindset from just broadcasting to becoming more commercially minded. So our industry is so used to adapting and reinventing and including for so many years that I think it's the one platform that is actually doing it brilliantly, and that is embracing the other platforms. Utilise called it an extension, I think, just now, and that is exactly what it is. It's nothing different. It's not a major thing. It's nothing to be fearful of. If a client wants to extend your message that you're delivering on FM anyway to your social media, giving it a different flavor and a different spin there, that's fantastic. We used to it in radio. We used to including other. We had to, from way back then, had to keep up with. We were forced to, more than any other of the other platforms, I think. So it's not I think if you're still in a situation where you find that to be intimidating or you don't want to do it, then you really haven't kept up with the times. It's a lot more simple and natural, as you may think.
John, is there a sort of responsibility with kind of media planners and the people who decide where brands spend their money to stop seeing things in boxes, to stop thinking of radio as a radio buy, of digital as a digital buy, and to really push for integration? And how involved would you say we are in a South African media and marketing landscape at figuring out and rolling out those kind of really integrated pieces? Or is everyone still fighting for their share without realizing that together actually is where the sweet spot lies?
Ari, I think you've touched on the most critical point. And in terms of radio's evolution in South Africa, I think you've touched on a really critical point. And that really is that radio has evolved into audio. And I'm talking beyond just social media here. I'm talking beyond integration with social media. I'm talking about brands planning an audio strategy and thinking, not only do I need to reach my market on the correct radio stations and by the correct audience through those radio stations, but I know that there's been a listening revolution, and I know that South Africans are now listening. They're streaming music, they're podcasting, and they are still at 89% listening to terrestrial radio stations. But there's a reality out there that the radio stations do need to embrace, which is that listening patterns are changing. And we've got to find a way for brands to insert themselves into those ears that are now listening to whatever. Just look around you. You see people, whether it's a gym, whether it's in taxis, buses, walking, running, they have something in their ears. They're listening to something. It might be an audiobook. It might be streaming, podcasting. It's probably still a radio station, chances are. So I think that's where it is going to become far more appealing when the industry as a whole, so when Prime Media's sales team and MediaMarkt's sales team and SABC's sales team and Ultimate Media go and start talking audio strategy to media strategists and start saying, here's how we can help you take advantage of this listening revolution. So there is a problem, I think, at the moment with if you just think of radio in traditional radio terms, whether we like it or not, we still do hit 89% of the population. There is a certain tiredness, a jadedness. It's something that print hit many years ago. And I think we as an industry, there's an opportunity, it's a golden opportunity that digital audio is bringing to the party. It's making audio sexy again. The reality is that it's not going to make an awful lot of money for many people, digital audio, but it's going to start directing money back into terrestrial radio. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how we need to start thinking of radio, not in terms of radio, but in terms of audio, the whole gamut.
Will you hear sort of John's sort of expression on the importance of audio moving forward, thinking out of the radio box, thinking out of the digital box, thinking about an audio strategy? I mean, as talent, how do you comprehend something like that and think about how it's going to impact your future projects and sort of your future sort of work that you're going to be doing in the South African kind of media landscape?
I think it creates a lot of opportunity, Arya, because, you know, it's something that Martin was touching on earlier about how when a brand walks into the doors of their station, it's nothing different if you want to continue it off air. But I do think that as talent, you also have to understand that 947 is running their business and you as a presenter are also running your business. And so there has to be thought and intention about what you take and what you don't, what you continue onto your digital platforms, and not doing it for the sake of a paycheck. Because at the end of the day, it then becomes that your social media platforms or anything that you're doing off air looks like a Christmas tree, because you're doing everything that 947 is doing on air on your own platforms, and it can't work like that. The business models are different. The two platforms are different. There are synergies, yes, but it's important as talent to know what is your strategy as Utilise Ravere. What are the kind of brands that you want to partner with? What are the campaigns that you would want to take off air, but that naturally makes sense? Because at the end of the day, it's also about authenticity, Arya. And if you are not going to be able to truly be yourself off air because you're trying to match everything that's happening on air, there becomes a little bit, it's disingenuous at some point, you know. I do also think that what John is talking about in audio strategy is that the audio strategy also needs to go, I think, not just multi-platform, but multi-show. You know, I often think that when it comes to media planning and the sales team, when a brand comes in, it comes in onto one show. There are very few campaigns here and there that will go across the station, but it's okay, we want Martin to anchor this campaign, but have you thought about how Utilise can anchor a part of it, you know, and how she can speak to a part of it? So for instance, I'll make an example. Let's say Leroy Merlin comes in. I don't know, Martin, are you a family man? I think Martin's a family man. So he's able to speak about the Leroy Merlin experience from a family perspective, but Utilise can also plug in on her show from I'm a single girl, I go to Leroy Merlin on the weekends to buy a shelf or whatnot, but because the strategy has come in on we want to execute on the breakfast show, they lose out on so many other opportunities for that audio strategy to live on way beyond the big show, way beyond the big personality. And I think it's also important for stations themselves to also invest in the smaller talent who might not have the big following and the big numbers, because let's be honest, right? We're getting to that point where, am I hiring talent or am I hiring a person that's got the big following? And if we go to a point where we're just hiring people with numbers, we're going to lose what radio is about. We're going to lose the beauty of why people tune in, because now it's just that, oh, I must be the famous one to have a radio show. And if it becomes a thing of like, Utilise has 400,000 followers, but the next presenter only has 6,000, it's the station's responsibility to also invest in that little person, to grow them and grow their following and help them, you know, do better. Because when they do better as your talent, we all do better as a station. And it doesn't become this thing where I think stations are sometimes at a point where it's very transactional. It's whatever suits you, but you never look out for the talent and what it is that the talent will be able to do, not only today, but tomorrow for you as well. So I know I said a lot of things, but yeah, I think I answered your question.
Tony, yeah, you absolutely did. Let's pick up on this age-old debate of, can a social media influencer be great in a broadcasting context? And even if they're not great, is it still kind of worth it because of the audience that they kind of technically, a lot of people would say, maybe bring. On the programming back-end side of things, when you're looking at a lineup for a massive station or a small station, I mean, is there not the side of you that says, but they have these million followers, surely they're going to bring them to the station? Or have we evolved out of that and we still 100% truly sort of respect the craft of radio, and has this person come up through the ranks of campus radio into community radio, into commercial radio? And I mean, you have to tread carefully here, because looking at your brands that you worked on, a lot of people could say your brands do represent a lot of the biggest influencers in the country, but are they influencers because of the radio? Did you hire them because they were influencers? How do you manage that as you navigate the different radio stations and the different lineups that you ultimately empower?
All right, I'm talking about Metro FM. Hey, it's cool. Get right out. Listen, Ari, it's really a very tough one. All right, and I'll be very honest about it. And I am an authentic radio broadcaster kind of person. Anyone who knows me would especially in the past. Geez, it's been for the longest time. It's also important to know that at the end of the day, it's a business. All right. And I think that's where Utilise talked about how brands, stages need to be able to balance the two. Ultimately, at the end of the day, when we look at the numbers at the bottom line, there's got to be revenue brought into the station. The true point of the matter is this. The issue comes with being able to balance those numbers on social media vis-a-vis numbers on radio. And it's not every time, I'll be honest, with my experience, not every time that you get people who have big numbers on social media translate into big numbers onto radio. It's as simple as that. What happens, and Martin talked about it early on, it's still content. Content is absolutely key. But then underneath that is, again, the point of connection. A person who has millions of followers on social media is able to have those millions of followers because of some sort of connection. So some radio stations will sit down and have a strategy. And I think it's important to also state that many talent, in my experience, have taught that people just hire just because we're looking for a presenter. Stations hire for strategy. You sit down, you put a strategy together, and you say, okay, fine. I want person X, not as a presenter, but possibly as a contributor. And that's what some talent don't understand, is that it's not just a free-for-all, let's hire that person because they've got X amount of listeners. It might not be that. We know that some of these guys are not presenters, and they'll never be presenters, but they can be contributors who can then contribute something onto the show because they bring a certain element of something that you might want within your strategy that will then make people come through. Even if it's a fifth of the people that they bring onto, hey, that's a fifth that you never had. And so it really is a balancing act. And I've always said when I speak to young people around, and especially in varsity radio, guys, it's very important to be able to balance that, because ultimately we all do radio, we all are in broadcast for the love of broadcasting, but it's evolved so much from when we started way back when to where it is now, that ultimately audience and revenue is king. John will tell you, when they go and sit and do media buying, when Utilise talked about let's not just go to Martin, it's numbers, it's based on numbers. They put it into the system, they get the numbers out, and they go, okay, fine. Based on who I want to attract. If I want to attract an SEM 7 to 10, I'm more likely to get that on a show, on the breakfast show, whether it's, if I take Metro, for example, either More Flavor or a Dinero or Kings of the Weekend, it boils down to the numbers. And ultimately, the stations need to make the revenue that's going to pay the talent at the same time. So it really is a fine, it's a fine thin line. And I think the balancing act is what is needed. There is no way that you can say that, hey, let's just get social media talent all over your radio station. You'll kill the radio station completely, because broadcasting, believe it or not, is still an art. It's still an art. And in the past couple of years, we've realized that it's actually, it's gotten so hectic that even the younger generation coming up believe that you have to have X number of followers to actually be able to make it into the industry. And so they're also losing that sort of authenticity of broadcasting. But the question is, how do you as a talent also invest in yourself? Well, Ulisani talked about the responsibility of the station to invest in them. Yes, but also as a talent, you need to invest in yourself as well, to be able to know that, hey, in the next 2-3 years, I want to be at this level, I want to do this, because you've got to be able to marry the two. The balance is totally key on both sides.
We're talking Radio Reshaped and Redefined live this morning on the Red Zone and Financial Mail platforms. It's, of course, in association with the NAB. Martin, I want to kind of land out this social media influencer versus radio DJ debate from a talent perspective. I mean, do you feel a pressure to grow your social followings, or is it a case of what Tony's saying, where different people play different roles in that ecosystem? And how frustrated do you get sometimes when you see new lineups and they look great on Instagram, but they sound terrible when you turn on the station?
Look, I cannot agree with Tony more when it comes to the balancing act, but I want to link to that and say that talent management has become more important than before. It's one thing saying, because we're going to do what we do, but you as the PD or as the talent manager, you need to ask yourself a couple of questions, as you did back in the day, just hiring an FM radio presenter. It's not about how that person got the 4 million followers. It's not about how many followers they have. It's how they got them. Did they get it once because of a massive viral stunt? How are they managing it? How do they keep it up? Because to have one fantastic radio show is easy. To have 2 is easy. To have 10, for goodness sake, for a year long is easy. But, you know, to keep generating income, ratings and revenue for a radio station in the long term, because it's an investment, that's the hard part. So, and just linking to what Tony said as well, if someone has a massive following on social media, it doesn't necessarily make them a great radio presenter, but it could make them a great producer. There are a lot of people on air at the moment that were taken right to presenter position that actually should be producers. Because the key factor that makes you a great presenter is something actually quite specific. Sometimes what makes you a fantastic big influencer and a highly followed person on Instagram could really just come down to, you know, how attractive you are. And then, of course, if you are, you've got the 6-pack and a great body, then you become an influencer for health brands and, you know, gyms, etc., etc. But as a presenter, you need to, I think, come with a little bit more substance than that. You need to come with more filters. At the end of the day, you need to learn to read the room further than just who liked your post. You know, it's a little bit more all-encompassing, I think. So to answer your question, is it our responsibility to grow? Oh, absolutely. Because remember, and I think linking back to something Ulisani said earlier as well, so as a radio station, and Tony said it, and John, radio stations will now hire less specific names. So you don't only go after presenters or just after, I think you'll make a mistake if you just go after, I think we all agreed on that. You can't just go after highly followed people on Instagram or influencers. And you also can't just go for those people who just want to be the true radio FM voice. It's a much bigger package deal. The content is still there. You still need the filter. You still need to be able to connect. And to what does that mean in the year 2021? Is you've got to be savvy on FM. So you need to be a good conversationalist or storyteller or great connection point. But you also need to know, as Ulisani said, how to use the other platforms around you. So obviously you need to build them as well. It makes you a more dynamic hire. You know, and that's coming back to the guys and the ladies who hire the talent. You've got a couple of more things to consider here. You can't just, as Tony said so eloquently, you can't just zoom in on one thing. You will lose the radio station. And there are many examples like that, unfortunately. They thought that's an easy win. They're going to bring that audience with them to this. But as Ulisani said, that audience is there for something else. Doesn't necessarily mean. So yeah, getting back to what Tony said, the juggling thing, the balancing act. So absolutely, to make yourself a better hire, you have to consider all those platforms. It becomes part of the package deal. So they go, so-and-so might not have the biggest following on TikTok, but on Instagram, the kind of people that they interact with now is highly valuable for our brand and who we want to advertise to. And the person is this and this and this. If they're just one thing, is their purpose at a radio station? Absolutely. Not necessarily a presenter, maybe a producer.
I want to sort of pick up on what Martin's saying, what Tony's been speaking about. And John, I really want to put a lens on how sophisticated the media buyers in South Africa are. I mean, in digital, it's quite easy to say, I'm buying on a cost per thousand. And in radio, you can do the same thing. But we tend to find a lot of the time, and you on the front lines of this will perhaps know this better than what an outsider would, but very often a media buyer buys what they know and what they listen to and what they enjoy. And would you say that the sort of media buying fraternity in South Africa is data-led enough when it comes to radio? Because they may have an aversion to a specific personality, not listen to a specific show. And because of that human factor, they almost then don't buy it. Or would you say that the media buying sort of fraternity are very sophisticated, very data-driven, and strip their emotion and their time spent listening in the car experience out of the brands that they're buying on behalf of?
That's a great question. And I think, I've had conversations with senior media strategists who admit that it's not data-led enough. To be fair to them, it's often the client who's driving that decision, or sometimes it's the client's wife because she likes a particular show or whatever it might be. It's often highly unscientific. And what's ironic, I think, my background for many years was at Prime Media Broadcasting, selling brands, selling very sexy brands and presenters, and never having to worry about audience numbers. And I think, again, and this comes back to the challenge facing radio as an industry, if we are going to compete properly and seriously with digital, with TV going forward, there's no choice but to move to more of an audience-led buy. And that's a reality. And I know that sort of strikes fear into the hearts of many of the bigger brands, but it shouldn't. And I'll tell you why. And it comes back to the whole audio strategy thing, which is that you need to know when to use what platform. So you should be doing an audience buy. If your target market is females 25 to 45 in Gauteng earning over 30,000 Rand a month, there is an audience buy you can do it. And that will get split up between Kaya and Jacaranda and Highveld and Power, et cetera, et cetera. And that's your generic 30-second spot. Then, as I said, you could be doing stuff in the digital space, in podcasts and streaming, also buying audience. But when you're launching a new product, when you need to spike something, when it's a seasonal sale or whatever it might be, that's when you go and you start using brands and using presenters. And that's what Ultimate Media has kind of built its business on, is being able to help clients launch the new Samsung phone, launch a brand new vehicle, using people like Martin, like Mo Flavor, like Hulasani, getting those people to do something. So they may not be delivering the biggest audience technically for that market at that time, but they're a good association, they're a good connection with the brand. So it's not a case of all or nothing. You've got to combine all of these things. And as I say, you've got to know when to have your audience buy, when to have your digital audience buy, and when to use presenters and brands. So that is it all data driven? No. Should it be? No. But I think that's where, again, those conversations between the radio station sales teams or between Ultimate Media and those media strategists are so critical to know when to use what element.
And then, John, on the flip side of it, we've discussed how sophisticated the sort of media buyers are, but how sophisticated are the stations? And you work with a lot of them and their sales teams in terms of delivering solutions that are going to optimize that audience with the content that they create, because they can have the audience, but if the campaign creative and the execution is poor, then you have the platform, but you're not giving them the content, which was king. So how sophisticated would you say on the flip side the stations are when it comes to selling and implementing and playing properly to their audience?
Sorry, Ari, you cut out. That question was from me, was it?
Yes, yeah, it's kind of just looking at, I mean, we've spoken about how sophisticated the media buyers are, but how sophisticated are the stations? And how sophisticated are they at really creating branded content on their platforms that's going to land with the audience? Because you can have access to those 30,000 Rand earning Gauteng females, but if you give a terrible creative on a brand, that's not really going to move the needle at all. And how sophisticated are these stations when you're dealing with them day to day, at understanding the broader ecosystem in the picture, and the fact that they have to be open to innovating the campaign and really delivering something strong. I mean, we still have huge amounts of airtime and live readers don't even go live in the course of a year because of poor actual management on the ground at a radio station. So how sophisticated are they?
So, wow, a lot more sophisticated than they used to be, I would say. And of course, it varies from organization to organization and depending what resources each radio station has. But I think, I mean, when Ultimate Media started, in those days, promotions were station driven. They were purely tune builders. They were about building audience, and brands were allowed to attach their names to it. And I think what's happened is brands, and this has again probably been driven by digital, but brands have said, no, hang on a second, I want my campaign built around my brand, my message. Now that's a challenge for a radio station, because how do I do that and not tune listeners out? And I mean, geez, Tony and I have had many conversations around this kind of issue, and it is a challenge. So how do you do that? And that's where it has evolved. And I think the radio stations have become really good at being able to find a way to deliver what that brand needs and make the competition mechanic or whatever it might be resonate with the brand, but resonate with the listeners and not tune them out. And I think that's where we have learned to work very closely with brands, with the station brands and with presenters as well. Critical thing for us is always to brief a presenter directly before a campaign, because if the presenter can't understand what that client is trying to achieve, presenters are experienced, they're talented, they understand nuances, they understand marketing, they are marketers themselves. So when we sit with the presenter and we say, well, this is what the client is trying to achieve and here's the nuances, they get it straight away. The problem comes in is when you have too many links in that chain, and by the time it's briefed in, so when it gets briefed into perhaps a sales rep, and the time it gets to that presenter, it's just too long, and it's lost everything in. And the stations have become very accommodating and allowing us to do that, to brief not just presenters, but also the team and the producer as well. So in answer to your question, they've got a lot better. I think there's a way to go, but I think they've got a heck of a lot better because they understand that that's what clients are demanding these days.
We're going to cut to some audience questions in a second, but I do just want to sort of pick up on what we've chatted about with John from a talent perspective. I mean, John's speaking about quite a strong sort of lengthy process in getting down to the presenter. And when he says that, he means a brand briefs in an agency, who briefs in a media buyer, who briefs in an Ultimate on the radio component. Ultimate then go and brief in a radio station. The radio station sales team then brief in the programming team then brief in the producer then briefs in the talent. So Martin and Huli, when you're on the other end of that, you execute the thing as you've been told and then immediately find out that it's not what the client who sort of 10 points earlier in the process wanted. I mean, how do you then broach that as kind of the person? And are there too many links in that chain? I mean, should that in itself be reevaluated? Is that logical? Or is it just a question of communication, ironically, amongst people that are communications professionals?
I think it's about what you're saying, where you say, is it about the communication? It's really the how. And the onus also lies on us as talent to make sure that we understand the brief. The onus lies on us as talent to make sure that when you get your stack of live reads or whatever campaigns you're about to do for the show, you can't be reading it 5 minutes before the live read is supposed to go on. Because here's the thing, right? You can hear when a presenter is not prepared. You can hear when the talent is stumbling all over that campaign because they just themselves don't get it. And they will then turn around and say, yeah, but I wasn't briefed on time. It was a last minute thing and whatnot. And the truth of the matter is, dear talent, at the end of the day, they're not listening to Tony on air. They're not listening to John on air. They're listening to Martin and Utilise. So the listener is going to say, you messed it up. And so it does feel like it's, again, we're speaking about a lot about balance today, and that's what it is. If you don't understand as talent, it is up to you to put your hand up and say, hold on, can we just think around this mechanic? Does it make sense? Because at the end of the day, you're the one that interacts with your listeners, and you understand that sometimes some things just don't land. And if it's a case of, do we bring the presenter in at another level of the conversation so that it's not, like you said, producer then presenter? Perhaps it comes in when the sales team is now briefing the station, maybe. And maybe it's at a high level, because also we're busy, man, we've got things to do. We're on air, but we're not here to run your business at the same time. So it's a balancing act between the two, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. When I take on, so just to backtrack a moment, I mean, John also pointed it out, figures, numbers, data, very, very important. But you need to be versatile enough as a presenter to understand that client experience is as important. It is a person at the end of the day who makes the booking. It is a person that decides between 947 and Jacaranda FM and her team. So for me, when I take on an endorsement campaign these days, I absolutely insist on, and that's why I love speaking. That's why I love dealing with John and them at Ultimate Media. They always understand exactly the two things that I need. Number one, what do they want to accomplish? And number two, how are they going to measure the success? The moment I understand that, I can start running with the endorsement, and I can tell them, yes, I am the guy for the job, or no, I'm not the guy for the job. So that involvement, as Ulisani also said, is key. It is 100% correct. Gone are the days where it's just good enough for you to get a piece of paper put in front of you, and then you're going to read from there, and depend on your acting skills to pull it off. Those days are long, long, long gone. You are a radio presenter, you are a social media influencer, you are an endorsement campaigner, an ambassador, you're an extension of the radio station's business experience. You are often key when it comes to the client experience. We love dealing with Jacaranda, actually meant Martin pulled it off. You represent the entire business, the entire multimedia, or the entire multi-million rand business, not just live on air, but also these days behind the scenes. So once again, we know those factors. We understand preparation. For you to deliver the right content, you need to be prepared. For you to be prepared, information is power. You need to inform yourself, prepare yourself, etc., etc. And when it comes to client bookings and stuff like that, nothing has changed. It's exactly the same. Yeah. Too many people in the link and in the process, you will lose in translation, lost in translation. Absolutely. You'll miss it. And then the client will move on to the next radio station. It's your own vested interest, and you want them to book you again. And obviously they want to book at the radio station again. You have to be involved.
There's definitely a keyword, which is balance, coming through. In radio, they say that what's in it for the listener is the most important question. So we're going to spend the last couple of minutes just taking some of the questions that we've gotten on the live chat. Tony, I'm going to come to you first, and then after that, we'll do closing sort of thoughts. Some very aspiring young radio professionals watching us this morning. Here's a question. Is sending a demo via email still the way to get your foot into commercial radio, or how can one get themselves noticed beyond just sending emails?
Good question. Good question. It is, yes and no. And I'll tell you why. Program managers, I spent the last 7 years of my career being a program manager at Metro FM. And one of the things that I've always actively done is listen to radio stations outside where I work to try and find the next talent. 2 years ago, a year ago, actually, just got a young lady from Tux, TT in Pretoria. From a talent perspective, many program managers do, some program managers don't. It's really relative. Some still wait for emails or demos to come through. But as I mentioned earlier on, the problem with that is that in a commercial environment, program managers or station management now target a specific presenter that they want at the station. So it's not a case of, okay, let me listen to this person and see if is something that I'm going to need. The question is, we've put together our strategy. We want a kind of person who ticks these boxes for our 9 to 12 show. We want this person that ticks these boxes for our 12 to 3 show, depending on the type of audience we want to attract. And then we actively go and seek that person based on what it is that we're looking for. So in the commercial space, it is a bit more difficult now to be hired via a demo, because ultimately it really is what the station wants to have, who the station wants to have on a specific time slot. And in that space, they will actually go. I mean, I receive, and I kid you not, probably on average between 5 and 10 demos a day. And also, it's important to know who you send the demo to, as in what type of station you send the demo to. Sometimes I listen to a demo and I think, is this the right station you're sending it to? Is it not? Packaging is important, because sometimes there will be that spark. I mean, there are people that I have actually listened to demo and I actually give them a call back or send them an email back. And I'm like, you know what? This for me is talent. You've got something there. As opposed to starting to think, okay, can I maybe join the commercial brand? Maybe start where you are. Start in a regional station. Start with a varsity station. And then sort of work your way out, because there are people that are listening and there are people that are going, hey, that person can be someone that can fit the station based on, again, what the station wants at that particular time. It's not longer a matter of let's just hire anymore. It's like a hospital. You don't just hire a GP because you want a GP. You either hire a specific doctor because that's the need that you want at that specific time. And that is really the truth of the matter nowadays.
And then just a quick question for Martin before we come to kind of closing thoughts. Martin, do you have to keep to the script when undertaking a marketing campaign on air, or can you put your own spin on it to make it more memorable? It's power spot versus live read.
Absolutely. Once again, once you've empowered yourself with answers to questions like how are they going to measure the success, you build your story around that. One of the reasons why they hired you, hopefully, is the way that you can tell stories. And getting back to the one word that kept coming up, and that's how you connect with the audience. You connect with the audience your own special way. I connect with an audience different to the way that Utilise might do it. So it's important. It's all important for you to put your own spin on it. Otherwise, well, anybody could have done it. If you're just going to sit there and 100%. Read the key points, I don't think once again, get back to client, experience and satisfaction. They wouldn't want that. Those days are gone. You can't just sit there and read and just fake it till you make it. Use the word authentic. I think just now, Utilise. People know. They know the difference more these days than ever before. Whether you're faking it or whether you actually done your homework and you believe what you're selling people.
Right, and let's land it as we go around the table with about 60 seconds per person. Your message to the broader media and marketing community when it comes to using radio as a platform to get people to buy stuff, because unfortunately the platform does need to sustain itself with advertising. That's the reality. But how can we be doing this a little bit better? Really start us off.
I think one thing is radio is not dead. It's not dying. It will never die. Get that out of your head. Once you have jumped that hurdle, you can then get into a space of how do we create something that is different, that is memorable? How do we partner with presenters over and beyond what is just happening on air? And I think the message is also really for future talent to, it's what Martin touched on earlier on, you have to be more. That's just the way the game is right now. The industry has evolved, and you can either spend a lot of time saying, oh, it's not fair, the people and the numbers, or you can say, okay, this is how the game is played now. How am I going to make sure that I'm a player in that game? How am I going to make sure that I'm on that field so that I have an opportunity to be seen, to be heard, and to go out there and be the amazing broadcaster that I know that I am?
Tony, in 60 seconds.
I think for me, the first thing is that from a talent management perspective, as talent managers, we need to know that we hire talent for a specific reason. And giving them the freedom to do that, to do what they do best is extremely important. Also, on the advertising side, for example, I think advertisers need to also have the ability to trust the stations to be able to deliver. Sometimes I feel that a company or a brand will come with a specific idea, and it's a case of one sort of stuff fits all the brands. They want to do the same thing at 947, do the same thing at Metro, do the same thing at Jacaranda. People consume content differently. People consume advertising differently. So they need to be able to give stations the ability to understand what they want to project, what it is that they want to do, and secondly, understand that as radio stations, they understand their audience better than them. And so how they deliver that to their audience is extremely important. I always say language is very important. Obviously, at the SABC, we've got local languages stations that can be used to reach the audience, which is very important because when you speak directly to someone in their language, they are then able to understand better. So for me, it's two-way. It's talent management from the talent management side, the talent itself, and also the platforms and the advertisers need to play a major role in this whole ecosystem of radio.
Don't worry, Tony. John's there to back for you every day in not one size fits all implementing radio strategies.
You know, so John just absolutely worked with them for such a long time. Really love working with those guys. They do a fantastic job. I'll take my invoice, John.
Your word to the sort of broader ecosystem, advertisers and radio.
Yeah, I think the future of radio or the future of audio is really bright. And one of the reasons it's bright is because of talent. Talent has it's certainly raised the game over the past 10 years, what advertisers have been able to do with talent. And we're getting much better at how we do it and how much more authentic and creating better associations. And I just think everything I said about getting into the digital space is so important, and presenters need to, they need to know how to work, how to build their brands and get involved in other platforms, whether it be Spotify or TikTok or not just their own social media. But I think we've got, if we can work together and using talent as central to the whole thing, we've got an amazing future. I would love to see radio stations hand even more leeway over to presenters. I would love to let them be a little bit more daring, not straitjacket them so often, and allow them to do that on air and then build those brands into their other platforms as well. I think talent is absolutely key to where we're going.
Martin, just before you update your LinkedIn bio to presenter / creative strategist for brand campaigns, as John would like you to be now, your sort of final word.
Look, it comes down to one simple thing, and that is just advertise with Jacaranda FM for total. Look, radio has been fighting from its corner since as far back as MTV and the tape. People have been calling the death of radio for the longest time, and it's forced radio to reinvent, to keep up, to get ahead, to expand in every single way. That is why radio is still here. That is why it's not dead. That is why it's evolved and still a very, very powerful medium for that reason. I'll go as far as to say is that I think if other businesses and platforms were kept in a corner the way radio has and had to fight for its alleged survival as much as radio has, they would be better off today. Dare I say print? Possibly. Radio is so used to fighting. Radio is so used to proving its worth that it's now such an incredibly expansive, comprehensive buy. It's the social media. I mean, and it's probably the same for all the radio stations, as strong online as it is on FM, as diverse. There's literally nothing a business would want to sell that we can't offer. And I really, really do believe that. And I really mean that because we have been forced to evolve. We have been forced to reinvent. And the future of radio, definitely more digital. I think the future of radio is definitely also more internal. You are sitting already with, allegedly, the best content providers. You've hired them. You're already sitting with the best ideas people. That should be a filter for the talent buyers. Use them. Yeah. I'm not trying to cut out agencies here, but I'm saying the future of radio, I think, is definitely looking inwards. And if you've made sure that your staff complement are specialists that can once again tick all the boxes, and come to the party with great content, with great ideas, way to stay ahead and to reinvent. It's still a fantastic buy to this day. Even better, I think, than ever before.
Well, that's a great note to land it on at the risk of running late for the 10 a.m. news. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. This was a Red Zone and Financial Mail online event titled Radio Reshaped and Redefined. A special thanks to radio presenter at 947's Weekend Breakfast Show, Utilise Ravele, breakfast show presenter at Jack Rand FM, Martin Vesta, SABC Radio Business Manager for Combo Radio 2000, SAFM and Lotus FM, Toglo, and of course the co-owner at Ultimate Media, John Walls. If you missed any of this, it's available on demand on the Arena Events platforms. Till next time, cheers.